Hello and welcome to episode 190 of the Podiatry Business Podcast. So today's podcast is titled, When Should I Hire Another Podiatrist? So this is something I hear a lot from podiatry clinic owners, and it's something that I help my own coaching clients come up with a process of when we know it's right to take on that next person and how to do so in a proper manner. So the truth is that if you hire too early, what it can do is it can put you under massive financial pressure. And I've done that. I've overhired. I did so because we all know what recruitment is like, how hard it is. And I had the offer of more staff than I really needed, and I took them on in case I couldn't get them or someone left or whatever, but I ended up hiring too early and it put me under massive financial pressure. But also, hiring too late can be dangerous. It's bad for you, it's bad for your business, it keeps you stuck in the business, it limits growth, and it means that you're usually the bottleneck inside in your own clinic, because if you're understaffed, what will happen is it will be highly dependent on you as a business. Okay, so what I want to do is by the end of this podcast, I want to give you the three kind of signs that you know it's time to hire, the simple numbers that you need to check before you do so, and a kind of a safe hiring plan, so you don't just bring someone in and then scramble to fill their diary and go, oh, what am I going to do? How am I going to make them busy? So let's get into that. So the first sign is you need to know that you're consistently at capacity, not just busy. So what I mean is that you just didn't have a mad week last month, or that last week was bananas and I couldn't squeeze anyone in and the phone wouldn't stop ringing. I mean that you're consistently busy for 2-3 months. Ideally, the longer the better. That you're booked out most days. Now, you're never going to be 100% booked out. Let's be realistic. There's always going to be gaps at somewhere in the diary, last minute cancellations and so on, but that you're booked out most days. That you're squeezing people in on a regular basis, maybe during your coffee break or someone in a little bit later or so on. Maybe you're doing a nail surgery and you've nowhere to put the checkup, so you're having to come in early or stay late to do it. Or that the time that it's taking for people to get a new appointment, so your wait time is starting to creep up. So if patients are waiting too long, they're not going to, they're just going to go somewhere else. And for me, it's like essentially it's a revenue leak. It's lost income if you have a waiting list. So if what you have to ask yourself is, if a patient called you today, all things being equal, how, excluding last minute cancellations, how soon could you see them? And how many options do they have? Now, if you could have one appointment next week or one appointment this week, you're pretty much full. So how soon could you see them without you having to stay late or squeeze them in and so on? If the answer is not for a while, then you're probably already at capacity or leaking revenue. Now, we're going to go through a number because we need more than a gut feeling in a few minutes. The second sign is that you're finding that this demand is turning into stress and reduced quality of life for you and for the team, that you can feel the pressure and the stress inside in the business. So if the demand is turning into stress, it will often show up as that you're constantly behind, that maybe your notes and your admin are piling up on top of you. Maybe what's happening is you're having to take work home, or you maybe wake up on that Monday morning and you're having a dread of having to go into work because you know it's just going to be chock-a-block non-stop and that you're absolutely wrecked by the end of the day, end of the week. And that's not the point. That's not the point of starting a business. If you feel that you're wrecked from your business, well, that's not what you should be like, and it's no need for it to be like that. And it isn't just about the lifestyle issue, because your business should be there to give you a good lifestyle, but it's also a business risk, because if you're stretched, if you personally are stretched and you're leading that team, then what's going to happen is morale is going to drop, the quality of customer service is going to drop, the patient experience is going to drop. You're going to find that you're not retaining the level of patients or rebooking the patients that you could, and referrals will start to drop because people will see the kind of manic or mania inside in your business that it's all bananas all of the time. That's not can. Third sign is that you have a repeatable lead flow or a marketing channel of some description, or one that you can build fairly quickly. So you need to have a predictable way to generate new patients so that you can fill this new staff member's diary. Now, it could be paid ads, it could be organic, whatever. Because what the worst case scenario for you would be, you take on a podiatrist, you commit to paying them an income, and they're sitting there and their diary's not full, and you're just hoping that the diary fills. Hope is not a strategy when it comes to business. You need to have a plan. So before you hire, you want to have at least one reliable channel working. Maybe it's Google Ads, maybe it's Facebook or Instagram specific offers that work quite well. Maybe it's a strong internal reactivation or recall, that you're actively reactivating your database of patients, and you know that you've been doing this for a while. If I take on a staff member, I can run one of those reactivation campaigns and start to fill their diary and get things moving. Maybe you've got a referral system that you actually track, that it's not just word of mouth and you don't really know where your patients are coming from. If you don't have this, it doesn't mean you can't hire, but it does mean you need to start on it now, and you need to start to ramp that plan up so that the new clinician isn't coming in and sitting there with gaps in their diary, and you're paying them to sit there with nothing while your diary's full and you're treating all the patients. So I have a client at the moment who we just started working with about 6-8 months ago, and that client we initiated a marketing plan using Meta. So we did a Facebook ad, and what that Facebook ad has allowed them to do is to fill their diary, which they expanded, their staff's diary, and they've just taken on another staff member, knowing well that they now have a reliable marketing channel and that new staff member is going to have their diary full. That staff member started last week. The first week, all of their diary was full. This week it's full, and we're already talking about taking on another staff member because they have that reliable marketing channel that they know they can turn up as they need to. Okay, let's talk numbers. Okay, so we don't want to get too complicated, but you do need to have numbers. Can't just be working off gut. So there's really two numbers that you need to know when it comes to the decision about taking on your next podiatrist, and those are utilization rate and your break-even number. So utilization rate basically is how, as a percentage, how full is your diary. So what I mean by that is what you want to be thinking about is how full is the diary completely. Okay, so if I have a staff member, they're working 35 hours a week, how much of that space is available for them to treat patients? So you might find that out of 35, maybe you're doing CPD for an hour, so it brings it down to 34. Maybe you're doing a mentorship, which brings it down to 33 and a half, and so on. How much of that time is actually spent treating face to face? Are they actually seeing patients? And that's a number that you should measure as percentage, and it shouldn't be just gut, it should be actually measured. So with my clients, what we do is we use a software system that we help plug into their CRM, and they can see that number per staff member in real time so that they can make an educated decision that's not just working off gut. Now, what that number should be really depends on your clinic, and it varies from clinic to clinic. However, if I had to give you some experience in my own clinic, I used to have it at about 82-83%. What I found is when we went above that utilization rate, what was happening is my staff, the stress was building, and we actually found that we weren't really making any more money as a clinic, but my staff welfare wasn't as good. Now, what I did to implement that and change that is I implemented a paid coffee break every single morning. We close the clinic to patients, and the staff sit down and have a coffee break, and again we give them another break. This is excluding their lunch, obviously, in the afternoon for them to catch up on notes. So that meant that there was two gaps in the middle of the day for them to catch up on all the admin and so on and take a break. And it meant that as a utilization rate then it had to change because it was a higher number of a smaller amount. So you got to know what your number is for your clinic. Typically it's around 85, 90, 95%, depending on the clinic. Second number you got to know is what is your break even. So how many new patient visits or what revenue do you need to generate every single week for this new podiatrist to cover their cost? So what I mean by cost is their salary, their employer's tax, their consumables to have them run that, to treat those patients, etc., etc. Now, it doesn't have to be perfect number. A ballpark number is absolutely fine, but you do need to have that number, so that if you know, for example, it's going to cost you £500 a week to have that person in the clinic, you need to know how many patients you need them to see to break even, so you're not making a loss on that. Now, ideally, what I like to have, and if at all possible, I suggest to my clients to do the same, is that they have at least 50% of this number in cash on hand for a certain period of time, so that they can ramp up. So if you think about it this way, if the number is £1,500 per month, you need to be able to say to yourself, okay, surely they'll generate £750 in that first month. Do I have the other £750 in cash to make up that gap? And if you can say yes to whatever that number is, it gives you a support, a net, that you know that things will work out okay. You're not going to run out of cash. It's not going to put you under financial pressure. So ideally, I like to have that number, and I like to have a 3-month cushion for me, even though I know that's probably 3 times longer than I actually need it to be. So if you don't know your numbers, don't guess. Start writing them out, figure it out, and write them down before you make the hire. So they're your numbers. Now, the biggest mistakes I see when it comes to hiring are hiring before fixing the diary and your front desk system. So taking somebody on and not actually having fixed the diary, not having fixed your rebooking rates, your rebooking systems, and so on, and having a big leak in your business, which means that you're actually getting in loads of patients, but they're not coming back again, so the diary's not building and building and building for this new staff member. One of the biggest mistakes I see in podiatry is hiring an associate thinking it's going to save you money, because the idea is you only pay if they bring in money. But in the long term, in the medium and long term, what we've seen with our clients again and again and again, in 95 out of 100 times, is that this is a mistake, and it ends up with a bad culture inside of the business, because everyone is trying to basically generate their own income. Because if the associate doesn't have any work, then they're not going to make any income, and there's bad vibe, etc. So hiring an associate might sound like it's a great idea in the early stages. It really is not, and it's not a good way for you to run your business. It also means that you aren't able to predict what your costs are going to be relative to that staff member, because it's going to fluctuate so much every single week, every single month. Third thing I see is hiring in a rush. So you're desperate to take somebody in because you can see the work, and you take the first person that actually applies for the job. It could be a case that you maybe only get one application straight away, because that's the way it is in podiatry right now. And you hire almost anybody. If they come in and they have a pulse, I'll take them. And the problem with that is you can end up with a bad fit inside your business, and it can significantly deteriorate the culture in your clinic. These are all mistakes I've made myself, and mistakes I see consistently happening inside in clinics. Another mistake I see is not having a clear marketing plan on how am I going to fill this new staff member's diary, and just hoping that it will fill. That is not enough. It seems busy, I'm sure it'll fill. That's not enough. You need to have some sort of plan, a marketing plan, to make sure that you're in control of filling that diary. Next one I see is having no onboarding plan. So if you've no onboarding plan on how you're going to bring this person on, how you're going to get them to work your clinic's way, okay, if there's no consistency, then what's going to happen is the standard of care, the standard of customer service is not going to be controlled. So a very obvious example would be a patient comes in and sees this new staff member who does a treatment well, but completely differently to you, and they don't want to go back and see the new staff member because they like the way you did it. So because you don't have a standard of care, the patient becomes committed to an individual staff member. Instead, what you should have is an onboarding plan that gets the staff member, the new staff member, to work the way everybody else works. What you should also try to do is to try and have this onboarding plan ramp up over 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, which is what I'm going to get into now, what we call our 30, 60, 90 hiring plan. So if you want to hire without panic, okay, take someone on, there's a room, here's hopefully some patients, let's see what happens. You need to have a plan. So in the first 30 days before they start, what you need to do is you need to revisit your rebooking and recall system so that you're not having a leak in the business. You want to make sure that you have some sort of new marketing plan in place to generate new patients. Even if you're already busy, you don't want to wait till they start, you want to do this before they start. So launch a new patient marketing plan. It could be Google ads, could be Facebook ads, etc. You want to sit down and develop an onboarding plan. How am I going to bring this person on week by week over a 3-month period? And you need to make sure that you know your numbers, that you know what's needed for it to work, and that you've set your targets for that to work. Now, over the first 60 days of them starting, what you need to do is you need to onboard them in a logical way. So you need to have some sort of onboarding system worked out on how you're going to do this. So in my clinic, how do I do this? In the first week, I won't fill their diary completely. What I'll do is I'll leave more gaps than normal blocked out for them to kind of catch their breath, because it's a new situation, and for me to sit down and talk to them and say, how did you get on with this, etc. I'll also make sure that I gradually onboard the different type of treatments I want them to do, because I don't want them to treat everything in the first day. How are they possibly going to take on every different type of treatment in my way, in my clinic? So we will start with the most simple, the next most simple, and so on and so on. But I also want them to do something that is going to start to generate enough income to at least help me break even. So typically in my clinic, in the first week, all I want them doing is chiropody. By the end of the first week, know how to rebook the patient, know how to do padding, strapping, whatever it happens to be in our chiropody appointments, that the patient thinks, well, there's no difference between seeing Lorcan or that other staff member and there is seeing this patient. You want to aim for a realistic ramp up, that you're not going to have instant full books. Okay, if you have good systems, if you've good rebooking, good marketing, you will get there fairly quickly. And like a client I mentioned earlier, you could find within a week, 2 weeks that their diary is pretty full. But you want to aim to be realistic about it. You want to review over that first 60 days their marketing numbers on a weekly basis. Is it working? Is what I'm doing actually generating new patients that's going to help me fill this person's diary? And you want to make sure that patient, that clinician, has a defined schedule and patient types, like I talked about earlier. So you're gradually ramping up over the first month probably, and the type of work that you're giving them. So by day 90, what should be happening is you should be seeing a consistent utilization, that their diary is pretty full. It's the same as everyone else in the clinic. You should really know what it's going to cost you to get a lead, and it's what it costs you to get somebody actually book in as an appointment. That way you're confident in your marketing in turning it up, and that what you should have at this point is a repeatable new patient or a repeatable growth engine that drives that business and allows you to take on that new podiatrist when you decide you want to do so. So, when should you hire a new podiatrist? Well, you should do so when you've got a consistent demand, when you're at capacity, and you have a plan to keep them busy without you having to do everything yourself. So that for me is, I want to have an X utilization rate, whatever it happens to be for my clinic. I want to have some cash reserves in case the shit hits the fan and there's something wrong, that they can't rebook patients and so on, and the income's not generating and I'm not under stress. And then lastly, I also want to know, do I actually want more business? So just because you're busy doesn't always mean that you should take on more staff. I have to make sure that it fits my values and it fits my goals. So for the last probably 2 years, I haven't really tried to grow my own personal clinic because it didn't really fit my values and I was quite comfortable with it was. Now, I've changed that again in the last month or two, but I do see clinics coming along, clinic owners coming along, and they're taking on more staff when really they don't need to. It's going to cause them more pressure, more stress. It's not really going to make them happy. While I also see others who are too slow to take on that staff member, even though not having that staff member is putting them under pressure and stress. So it's got to be what actually, do you want more business, and does it fit your values and your goals to have more business? Because the more staff you have, the more complicated things can be. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be more stressful if you run it right, but if you don't run it right, it absolutely will be more stressful. So This is the sort of thing we do in our business coaching. We help our clinic owners, podiatry clinic owners, figure out what is the right next step. How do I know my numbers to take on someone? How do I find someone? How do I recruit properly? And then how do I onboard them? How do I make sure it's a success? How do I fill their diary? So if you want help with any of this, with making your business more sustainable and giving you a better financial future, then that's what we do. And we'd be delighted to help you here at More Practice Profits. All you got to do is go to morepracticeprofits.com and book a free 5-minute phone call. We call it a triage call. We'll give you a quick call on the phone. We'll have a chat. We'll see if we think we're a good fit for each other, if we think we can help. If not, we'll point you in the right direction. If we think we can, we'll talk next steps and we'll go from there. So until next time, this is Lorcan from the Podiatry Business Podcast signing out.